When I first started doing this podcast, there was that awareness of, hey, the camera is recording me. And I feel like, yes, over time, I have gotten better at forgetting about it. But I feel like an actor is a better person to ask about that. How do you get calm and comfortable with the camera recording you?
It's something that never really um it's not something it's something that took, over time. It's not really so much as being comfortable. I guess, throughout my life, ever since the sandbox, so to speak, I've been, I guess on the spot. I was very hyper when I was a kid, so I was always doing crazy stuff, And so whenever it came to acting, the camera didn't, it's not that I got scared or I got nervous or whichever. It's just it mainly came to how to act in front of a camera, how to perform in front of a camera versus, for example, a stage. you know I think those little technicalities and methods is what made me a little bit nervous. How do I do it? By doing it, really, just by continuing to do it, and continuing to learn. It's not something that you can learn in one shot. It's not something that you can get comfortable right away. And there's going to be times that you're going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be moments where that's going to happen. But it's just a matter of just doing the practice, doing the motion, where it will allow you to become more relaxed. And when you realize that you really are letting the camera do the work for you, that's where you start to let go and just be.
Well, explain that part to me.
Um, what I like to do with my characters, for example, I always like to use the world around me, use my environment as much as possible. I really love being able to just not so act freely, but at the same time really be able to use the environment. And then when I use my environment, for example, moving a chair or sitting down or dusting off a table, little things, the simplest things. It really, if I'm in that mode, if I'm, conscious of the camera, it gets me out of that thinking because I'm doing more things that, let's say, for example, the character would do, and you basically are enabling yourself to forget that you're in front of a camera, that you're in front of a crew, and you just start to just be present in the world, as who you are.
I like that Nike answer earlier. Just do it. But I'm still trying to figure out what you mean by letting the camera do the acting for you.
So a lot of it really is how to be able to, I guess, hone everything in. Like, for example, the camera, it picks up you. It picks up your eyes. It picks up, and your eyes are the windows to your soul. You know, and so you could be living in that moment. You can feel those emotions. You can be whomever, wherever, whenever the situation, what you want, and so forth. The camera's going to pick that up. You see, versus you're on stage and you have to physically embody the character, facial expressions, things like that. But once you're in front of a camera, you don't have to really do so much of that.
Hmm. Interesting. It's like in a way the camera is a litmus test of authenticity. Would you put it that way or not quite?
I would say kind of in a way. I would say mainly it's more of something that's, you know, whenever you're in front of a camera, you forget, you sometimes in the beginning you forget what you actually do in regular situations. For example, having a conversation. You know, when you have conversations, you don't make a bunch of facial expressions. You don't move around so much. You know, you're looking at the person. You're looking at them, and most of all, you're listening. And when you and basically the camera, when I say, you know, allowing it to do the work for you, is just be present. Just be present. Be in the moment, and the camera will pick up the rest. It'll pick up your intentions. It'll pick up your emotions. It'll pick up what's going on within the scene without you having to do so much, if that makes sense.
I think it does. And I'm sure there's more to that conversation, but I guess I
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
share one of the perspectives for me. I think one of the ways that I got more comfortable with the camera recording is something that goes back to Matthew McConaughey. He says, less impress, more involved. And I think that's what you're referring to, where it's like you're just being.
Yeah.
And so it's just observing you being present. And that gives off the authenticity. At least that's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, because in that moment when you're filming, you've already studied your script. You've already studied it. You've already memorized your lines. You've already developed your character. You already understood the story and everything, right? And then after that, when you're in that moment, when you start to film, you let it go. You know what I mean? It's you don't sit there and think, okay, I have to be upset, or I have to say it this way, or I have to look that way. Because in that point, in that moment, you're acting, you see, versus letting yourself go in the sense of listening, observing, being in that moment, being in that environment, reacting, responding. You know, once you stop thinking about, you know, what to do, when to do it, how to do it, the rest will just come. You know, now of course there's little technical things here and there, you know, that you have to learn along the way. But I think that's one of the biggest things is that when you're in that moment, when you're in that scene, as long as you're there present, as long as you and the character or characters or yourself, as long as you're responding to what's been given to you in the script, what's being given to you in that moment, that's all that really matters is to respond to that. And sometimes it could be responding with silence. Sometimes it could be responding with just, you know, being blank. But it becomes you're not it beca- and I say this, you're not doing things because of, or you're doing things because of, you're not doing things just because, if that makes sense.
That's
You know what I
beautiful. Is
mean?
that you?
I guess so. I've never heard of it. I've something that, you know, every time over the years when I do my process, I learn more and more and more and listen to my peers and much actors much more experienced. It really comes down to doing things because of, not just because. You see, just because it looks cool, just because it's funny, just
That
because
part,
people think you're angry. No, it's because of someone just died. It's because of I'm feeling sick. It's because of it's raining outside. You know, though that will allow you to be in that moment mostly and to be able to respond, to react, to
yeah.
be in that world, so to speak, as yourself, you know, as yourself, but within that character.
And it goes back to that thing that Matthew McConaughey said, less impressed, more involved. I feel like the key to acting is to be unafraid of looking bad on film. Like you don't always have to look cool. And
Right.
there's something that Joaquin Phoenix actually said once that really stuck with me. He's talking about how at some point in his journey he realized not every scene has to be like perfect or beautiful or an amazing masterpiece. Some of it is just connective tissue. And he used that term, connective tissue. Like that's all it is. And I'm like, yeah, he's so right. And some things, if they're just connective tissue, they don't have to look the coolest. They can be
Yeah.
plain, regular, lame even. Does your experience suggest that? What do you think?
You know, I think one like an actor whom I admire very much, Ryan Gosling. He said it, later on in the years. Um, it's really not about what you're feeling. It's about what the audience is feeling. It's about what they're picking up. It's about what they're receiving. And there's going to be moments, yeah, you're right. It doesn't look cool. It doesn't look sexy. You know what I'm saying? But that's because that's not what it's about. You see what I'm saying? It's not about trying to be cool or looking cool, You're doing a film, it's a story. You're doing your character. They have certain mannerisms, they have certain things, they say certain lines in certain ways. And sometimes it's not going to come out the way you expect them or the way you want. You know what I mean? So I would say it's something where, when as more and more you connect yourself to the text, the more and more you'll be able to allow yourself to, be free in that moment, to let go in that moment. So I would say, yeah, that is something a little bit along the lines of that.
Yeah. And for some reason, this conversation is making me think of this one movie with Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal. Let me see what it's called.
Prisoners,
Prisoners. Yes, I
phenomenal.
loved Jake Gyllenhaal playing Officer Loki, and you see like his mannerisms, and like
Yeah,
he's a very particular character in that film, and
yeah,
so like that makes me think, man. I was on a movie set earlier this year, and what I realized was a lot of the actors' job can be summed up into one word: again. Do it again and again and again. It's like a lot of replays. There's so much repetition
yeah,
in this job.
absolutely.
Tell me about your experience with the repetition of having to do it again and again and again, and at the same time, keeping that fire lit in you. Because I feel like you can get burnt out with the reps.
What helps me is walking. Let me be more specific. What helps me is walking like like the character would, right? As I'm walking, I say the lines, and I keep saying them over and over. I could walk in a circle. I could, be in a grocery store. I put myself, I don't just set a time and say, okay, I'm going to use this time to learn my lines and repetition, repetition, repetition. No, what I like to do is I like to do those things in any moment, when you're happy, when you're sad, when you're really tired, you know, I love to rehearse those lines. I love to just repeat, repetition, repetition. That way, it it's ingrained in you. You know what I mean? It becomes so ingrained in you, it becomes a part of you. And then it goes back to when you get to that moment, you're allowed to be free in that moment because it's so within you, from all the repetition, from doing it in various modes, and I mean in various moods, various situations, and it truly helps. Not only memorizing the lines, but being able to, use the lines when the time comes, when it comes
Mm.
to respond, when it comes to react, when it comes to be in that moment.
Help me understand memorizing lines because I sometimes still can't fathom it. There's so many lines. There can be, and there often are so many lines in just one scene. How do you remember them?
I mean, I like to me, and any everybody else is different. Me right now, what I do is I read the line. First, I read this. I read the script. It's I read the script because at that point you understand your lines more. You know, you understand the why. See, it's not just about memorizing. If you just sit there and memorize, it becomes a chore. So what I do is first, I'll say, I rode the bus to school, and I'll close my eyes and I'll say it over again a couple of times. Then I go to the next sentence and next sentence and next sentence. And then at that moment, that's where I start to like get it in my mind, get it in my head. I start to visualize it, and most of all, when you're doing that, you're discovering the why behind the lines, why it's being said, what's causing you to say it. What setting are you in? What do you want? What are you after? Um, that's really how it helps me memorize these lines. Is repeating them, closing my eyes and repeating them, visualizing them in my mind, and then at that point, um, you know, being able, learning the why behind them, because that way it doesn't just become lines you're memorizing. It starts to become the life, it starts to become the voice of the script of your character, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when soldiers they deem people who aren't soldiers as civilians. When you're an actor, you're an actor, right?
Right.
And then there's you that's not acting. I mean, Marlon Brando would probably beg to differ, but there's a version of you that's just being you, just being Mike.
Yeah.
Do you like yourself better as an actor or when you're Mike?
Ooh.
Who exudes more of the person you want to be?
You know, that's a very good question. I have never been asked that. That's awesome. I think what I'm gonna go with though is I like myself more because without myself, there wouldn't be this character the way I'm doing it. It could be a character that's been done 1,000 times. It could be Macbeth, and it could be Stanley Kowalski. Which by the way, that's a horrible choice because nobody can ever top Marlon on it's the Kowalski effect. But what I really like to think is that how are these characters coming to life? And
You're
the
the
world,
channel through which they
yes,
come.
it's because of you. It's because you're giving it that breath. You
Yeah.
know, it's not because you are something else completely. I mean, yeah, that's great, but there's always going to be a part of you that's within that character because that's how you start to really bring it to life. It's not artificial. Um, so I would like to say that, yeah, I really like myself because without myself, there wouldn't be that version that the world has never seen before.
That's a good perspective, man. And the reason I love creating things, writing things, doing things, anything artistic is because I feel like it enables me to live the way I prefer to. So, for example, like when I write a story, I feel like I can live vicariously through the characters. Or if write a song or a poem, I feel like it's articulating a truth more proficiently and poetically, then I would be able to say otherwise in just like a regular conversation sometimes. So
Exactly.
that's what I love about, being creative. But I like what you said. It's like, yeah, all that's great, but none of that would be possible if there isn't the you, the regular, ordinary you, to kind of put that into motion.
Right. Exactly. That's, at least for the most part, that's, what I believe. It could change 5 or 10 years from now, but honestly, I think you are the vessel for these characters to be able to tell the story. You know what I'm saying? Like it comes through you, it channels through you, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a very beautiful thing. It's not the easiest thing at times. It's not always the easiest thing, but it's definitely a beautiful process. And it's a process that even, it can help others. It can, when others see us, a situation in the film that you're portraying and someone else is going through the exact same thing and they relive that, but then it could be healing at the same
Yeah.
time. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, how that's possible through you. So,
Yeah. No, true, man. Last night I was watching Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning with my dad, and there's just like I feel like any Tom Cruise movie, really, you watch it and you're like, man, I feel inspired because he never gives up. He's relenting. He never lets you down, as I once heard, and it feels like that. It's like you feel inspired when you see that. So
yeah,
when you
I
act, you're able to do that for somebody, inspire them.
yeah, exactly. And it's through many different ways. It's not just through action films. It's
Uh-huh.
not just through comedy. It's not just through drama. It has many instances, many languages. Human behavior.
What is a role that you've played that you feel most closely attached to?
Hmm. I'm gonna have to say there's different ones that I've felt attached to more so. Um, I would say one of them is Meet the Amos, as
Yeah,
Will, you know, um, because I've been in situations like that, where I'm, in a situation where I'm trying to get an approval of something or of someone, when in fact you don't really need to act or be a certain way in order to get approval of anyone. Just as long as you're yourself, that's all that matters. Um, Another character I would say that I felt closest to. Hmm. Let me get back to that. Let me get back to that. That's a very good question. That is one that I really want to think about. So if it's okay, yeah, I would love to circle back to that.
yeah, of course. I'm open to that. And I asked that question because what's interesting to me about acting in particular is I feel like more often than not, the role you play is sort of predisposed in the sense that, sure, you audition for the character, but you didn't come up with that character.
Right,
Somebody else did. And now you just have to fit the bill. And so
right.
I think that's fascinating because it's like now you have to, it's kind of like making a deal with that character. I got to be you. And it's not coming from you, but you guys got to work together.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really so. I mean, always transactional. I mean, again, it could be different for everybody else. Yes, I mean, somebody else did come up with that character, of course. But at the same time, there's also things that you can give to the character, that the person who created it never even realized, never even thought of. Most recently, I did a character for this short film. It's called Scene 32, where basically I'm an older gentleman. I'm an older man who is basically trying to buy $10,000 worth of Twinkies from someone who's selling it. I know it sounds crazy. Now, in the script, how it's read, it's read a certain way. However, there's things that I did with the character that the director, and I'm not, of course, I'm not discrediting the character. I mean, director is great. And what I was happy is that he allowed me to do that. Also it's that relationship that you have with your director. With whomever created this character, it also comes down to that communication between you and the director because it's bringing that vision to life. You see, and so there were many things, many little things that I did for this character as this character that emphasized even more so of, even more so of how the character was originally imagined. It's like adding to the perspective,
Yeah, yeah. No,
you
I
know.
know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's kind of like um, when you're acting, you are actually like that's the model. Like Rick Rubin, he talks about something beautiful. Ideas, when you're like battling with ideas, it's not very helpful because they're just ideas. You have to make like a physical model or like play it out, sing it out, write it out, whatever. Like have something outside of the mind and see how it goes. And then from there, it can evolve. And so I feel like acting is like that. When somebody writes the character a particular way, okay, they wrote it a certain way that they imagined in their mind. Now here you are, you're bringing that to life. What you're doing is you're modeling it out. And sometimes your additions or your reductions can be helpful to the process.
Right. And as long as you're 100% committed, and as long as it's compelling and it contributes to the story, that it gives or takes in some way to other characters in the story, in that moment, in that film, that's what matters. If you doing it, like, again, it goes back to just because, then it's not really going to work out, and then it becomes a little selfish, you see, because at that point you're making it about you, versus, you have this passion, you have this excitement, and you communicate that. Of course, you communicate that. You talk about that. You get with the director. You let them know, hey, I was thinking about this or that, and it would give back to the story because of this. What do you think? You know, um, all of those things are very important when it comes down to, um, when it comes down to doing that.
Yeah. With all your experience, why do you think people overact?
It could be a number of reasons. A lot of times they do it because, they have this idea in their mind and they've rehearsed it such way. They've wanted to do it a certain way. And then when it comes down to that moment, it's like they end up overacting it, overdoing it because they're stuck to that way. Does that make sense? Versus what's calling for in the moment. You know what I mean? What the scene is calling for. The scene is calling for, you to be calm and cool and collective, versus, but then, somebody thinks, oh, it's a good idea to be angry, mad, and upset and yell and scream, then at that point, you're making it about you. You're in your own head.
You're throwing a tantrum.
Exactly. You're starting to let out personal stuff, and at that point, that's where it starts to, not only are you acting, but you're completely off topic. For example, you're completely off the story, and you take away the meaning of
Yeah.
that story, of that scene. And most of all, it's not good for your scene partner. You
Yeah.
know,
Or even, you're well, yeah, this says that exactly. It's more impressing than it is being involved. You're not picking up on the right cues. And I like how you put that, man, because it's making me think of, when you have a conversation with two people, and let's just say it happened, it's common. One person is not really listening. They're just waiting to say something. It's like, oh, you were just nodding your head and saying, yeah, but you were just waiting to say what you wanted to say. It's kind of like that, where that's why the conversation maybe doesn't flow sometimes.
yeah, and that's the thing. A lot of times, it's waiting for the other person to say their lines. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be like that.
Mm,
I mean, it shouldn't be just waiting, because then at that point you're thinking about the lines versus you are in the moment, you're doing whatever, you're listening to them, you're actively listening to them. You know, that really, that's what it comes down to, is that, if you're there just waiting for someone to say their lines, well, I mean, it makes it less interesting. It makes it,
yeah,
and the audience is going to pick up on that, because again, the camera it picks up all of that, and the audience is going to look at that and they're going to be like, and I've seen movies that do this. What are they doing? What is he? Why is he just standing there? Why? It just doesn't make sense. And a lot of the times it's because they're just waiting for the line to be said. You know,
yeah.
and
That's a really
yes,
good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, it's like there's a difference between waiting and paying attention. You can bore yourself with that waiting, as you alluded to earlier. Um, yeah, man.
yeah,
How are you looking on time, by the way? Are you good?
I'm great actually.
Okay.
Yeah, let me
Yeah.
see. Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, cool.
I'm actually later on. I think around 8. I'm going to a little screening, like a monthly screening. It's the Houston Film Commission.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
I haven't been to a screening in a long time. So other than the one I went to last Saturday, or no, not last Saturday, the Saturday before for Meet the Amos, it was at another little festival. But yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and show up tonight. It'll be at Brazil, so we're good on time.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, I guess tell me more about the life of an actor outside of film. Tell me more about yourself, Let's make it a little bit more like Joe Rogan. Let's shoot the breeze about anything and everything.
Yeah. Well, my life outside of acting, I have a day job, so there's that, because I gotta eat and I gotta pay rent, and I also help out my family. Um, I this it's a 9 to 5 job. Um, outside and then outside of that, I'm if it's not working, it's taking care of my family, making sure my mother's okay, my nephews, um, or going to the gym, working out, or it involves getting getting ready for, like, studying a script, things like that. Really, life for me specifically, um, it's simple at this, in a way. It's simple, but I'm always busy. I'm always, I'm always hustling, and I try to find time to, do things that contribute to the craft. You know what I mean? I try to, go see a play. I try to go see a film. You know, but most of the time, right now, until I get to that point where I'm able to make, a living off of just acting, I gotta work. I gotta wake up early. I gotta, show up. I have to, go grocery shopping. I gotta cook dinner. And my wife cooked dinner last night, so tonight it's
I didn't even
this
know
night.
you were married. Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, it was a little thing. It happened this year in January.
Congrats, man.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Damn.
So there's also that now that I'm,
Uh,
adjusting to married life. Um, but yeah, really for me, it's mainly outside of acting, is work, family, also school. I just started going to school again, online classes for my IT. Um, yeah, for my BS in IT, and yeah, and I'm doing that, and meanwhile, auditioning, auditioning, until the next project comes. So it really is about what can I do within that time. Also, if I could take some classes with a certain acting coach, or if there's a play that they're going to do and they want me to be a part of it, well, I take advantage in doing that. So really, it involves a lot of work, a lot of being with family, but also at the same time trying to definitely finding time for my health as well, and to be able to contribute or develop the craft even more. You know what I'm saying?
Something
I
that stuck with me for a long time is something that Emily Blunt had said. She's talking about acting, the acting world. She's like, in this industry, you gotta have thick skin,
mm,
thick skin. And I feel like actors are the people who perhaps have the thickest skin because you have to be so comfortable with failure. Has to be like a pebble being flicked at a giant. It has to mean nothing to you, you know? Tell me about your relationship with rejection, failure, the word no.
well, that's something that I really know too well. You know, um, in the beginning, years ago when I started out, um,
By the way, I wanted to say, like, not even just in acting, like, just in life in general. I
in
feel like it's such
general,
an advantage to be able to have that thick skin.
well, yeah, it's rejection is a great thing. It really is. Rejection, because what you've done is you put yourself in a situation outside of your comfort zone, and what it does, it helps you build character or grow thicker skin. Throughout my life, in the beginning, of course, when I was a lot younger, rejection was a hurtful thing. You know, I unfortunately, can be, um, I have a big heart, and I get sensitive at times, and the reasons why I've been rejected. I've always been a big guy. I was actually a lot bigger before. I was over 500 pounds at one point.
Wow.
Um, yeah, my life has been really like, ups and downs, just like my weight, but there were many times throughout my life where I was rejected, so many things that I wanted, that I really truly aspired to do, whether it's wanting to get that job, or wanting to get that wanting to, get into a certain school, acting school, or so many different things, right? But in the beginning, of course, it hurts. But what happens over time in my relationship with rejection, I've been able to get to a point where it's a part of life, period, you know? And it's something that you're going to experience for the rest of your life. It just becomes less and less and less, you know? Because at that point, you don't let things get to you in the sense that you've already been told no so many times about so many things. You've already been called names, you've already been told you're delusional or you're dreaming too big or, whichever. And the fact that you can keep going beyond that and that you realize life keeps going. The world is, I mean, yeah, it's a small place, but the world is very vast. And no matter what, there's always tomorrow. And as long as you just, take it day by day, put one foot in front of the other, you're always you become much more confident. You become much more resilient towards rejections. It becomes a thing like, hey, no, okay, cool, on to the next one, and period, simple. So it's something that you realize that you're not going to die just because you're told no, or you're not going to get that part or get that job, or whatever the case may be. You learn that it is truly a part of life. It's not always going to be the way you want it. And most of all, it helps you learn how to not have expectations. You
Yeah.
know,
And I think
it,
another beauty of being an actor in that specific regard is you're constantly training that rejection muscle, you know?
mm,
So you're
hmm
constantly taking like those reps in, and that's how you get stronger at it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's how, like I said, um, you, you like, for example, when it comes to acting, there was times I was told no because of my size. I was too fat. You know, and I think anybody else that just wants to just get into acting, I think a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but I think certain people who really don't have the passion or want to do acting, they will probably give up after that. You know, there's people that would give up after that because it's a lot for them to listen to handle. It's not for them, you know. But when you realize that even if you're told that, yet you can doubt yourself, you can say maybe I should just give up, but you keep going anyways. You know, that right there within itself helps you and become to the point where you get to a level that you're going to say, you know what, I'm not going, I'm here to stay. I'm not going anywhere. This is what I want. This is what I'm going to go after. If it's not going to be through this avenue, it's going to be through the other avenue, and so forth and so forth. And you're gonna find a way. You just have to keep going. You can't stop. I'm not saying burn yourself out, but at the same time, you have to just do the motion, one
Yeah.
foot in front of the other.
Makes me think of that Elvis line, lonely rivers flow to the sea. And of course, that song is about something else, but it's like that. The thing you said about the avenue. Okay, if it's not this avenue, another one, another one, another one. Eventually, the river finds the ocean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's and also most of all, it's a part of the process.
Mm.
It's all a part of the process. Everything happens for a reason. I truly believe that. I truly believe that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
Everything happens for you to grow. You have to go through pain in order to grow. And to the point you don't have that pain anymore. That way, when you're really in it and you're really there in the moment that you've been working so hard for, the little things that would have bothered you in the beginning are not going to bother you anymore.
Yeah.
And you're going to know how to push through those moments like nothing. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. And if you're not, you know, if there's no rejection or if there's no down times or whichever, then you're not gonna know what it's like when, let's say, you make it to, you have that role, you're in that regular series and you got what you want, and then all of a sudden you get to a moment where you're not doing anything. Then at that moment you know how to handle that. You won't just go to it into oblivion. You know what I mean? Like, it won't be as painful because you've already gone through that. You know, you've
Yeah.
already put yourself out of that comfort zone. You know, you've already put yourself in these situations. You know, so I I say it's rejection, although it's painful, it's a beautiful thing, because it's a part of the process and it
My
helps you grow.
favorite quote on rejection comes from M. Night Shyamalan. He said to Rick Rubin, "The joy of rejection is that you never fall in love with the illusion." And I love it. And it's true. It's
Wow,
true.
I've
Yeah.
not heard of that. Okay.
Yeah. I really love that one. It's kind of close to my heart, but it's so true. But yeah, it's something I think about, man. I feel like actors are among the group of people out there with some of the thickest skin because no, 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 it's just it's common currency to hear that.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's a privilege.
yeah,
And also it's a privilege to even do what you're doing. I mean, you're already doing something that many people probably just dream of doing, you know, whether it's just a play in a community theater or it's a short film. The fact that you're doing it, there's other people out there who dream about just doing those things. You know what I mean? So there's comfort within that. That's something that you can use as well. You
yeah.
know, whenever you have these, rejections, or whenever you're going through, life and anything that you do, is always there's somebody that would kill to be where you're at. So that's why you have to be grateful. You have to be humble, and you have to say that, hey, I am able to do this, and I'm going to keep going.
You know, the beautiful thing about a conversation like this right now is it's an excellent reminder. And you and me will both know this information, but when you're in a situation that requires that knowledge, it's like you'll know it, but maybe you won't be able to feel it because it does suck. It can suck. And I feel like an actor is a great person to ask this question to because when you're acting, um, maybe you'll know all the techniques, you'll know what to do, you'll know how to do it, but maybe you don't feel it. But
Right.
you're an actor, so you still have to pull it off. How do you do it? Because if I'm not mistaken, I heard it from David Carradine where he's like, he didn't necessarily think you had to feel it to show it.
Well, there are going to be moments like that. And again, it's acting within itself is something that you're constantly learning, you're constantly developing, you're constantly growing. So you can have all the tools, but there is going to come that moment where you're just not into it. The tears are not coming. Um, you're not understanding the scene. There's just moments where you really have to just, you've already prepared for it. For example, you've already learned your lines or whatever. You're here. Okay. Just do the best you can. Just say the lines. Do whatever you feel in that moment. And it could be that moment where you feel, let's say, for example, you're supposed to feel very sad about something. But in that moment, you're not sad. You're just numb, you know? And you just have no choice but to just say it that way, be that way, you know? That could be what the scene was missing. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Sometimes what you feel in the moment is what the scene actually needed. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Um, Now I'm not saying that's always going to happen, and the beauty of it is, you can always do another take. You know, um, and that's it. Because yeah, I there's been times I've struggled, to like feel a certain way, be a certain way. So what do? I go back to the lines, and I just I go through, and then I look around me. All right, I look around me. I look at my environment. I look at the moment, and I just try to relax. You know, don't panic. The camera's rolling. Whenever you're ready, do what you got to do, and that's it. And then at that point, if the director likes it, on to the next scene.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, well, that wasn't that bad. Or, oh, you know what? Yeah, we're missing this. Let's try it this way. And, okay, well, then at that point, it gives you a better direction of where you need to gear towards,
Yeah.
and it allows you more time to get where you need to be.
Yeah. If you're sweating bullets, you're sweating bullets. Maybe they'll use it, eh?
Yeah, just use what you got. That's
Yeah.
why I say it's so important to become a part of your environment.
Mm.
Become a part of whatever situation or world that you're in.
Mm.
Just exactly, just be, just relax, don't panic. Um, and if you freeze up, just breathe, stop, breathe, and then through when you start to breathe, you start to something starts to happen. Because what happens when you panic, you stop breathing, you freeze up, you don't know what to do. So that's why it's important to just pause, to breathe. If you need a moment, say, hey, just I need a moment. Trust me, a good director will understand. Okay, yeah, let's whenever you're ready. And that's happened. And well, I've been blessed enough to work with a lot of great directors, who are understanding, who are compassionate, who understand actors. A lot of them are actors themselves, so that helps too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But and if it comes down to that moment where the director's not so nice or not so great, and you're pissed off, or whichever, then channel that energy. Learn how to use that.
Yeah.
Learn how to use what you have, where you're at, the time it is. Just use it,
Even if it isn't pretty. Yeah.
even if it isn't prison, even if it isn't anything at all. You know, and it happens to the best actors. Like for example, Brad Pitt. I believe it happened with him in Troy, where there was
Really?
one scene. Yeah, I heard in an interview where there was this one scene that he did, or he did quite a few scenes, but there was like this one scene where it was that he hated it. He hated it because he wasn't in anything. He just literally just said the lines, right? But what happens when you watch that movie? You watch that scene, for example. You feel like that's a badass moment, right? You feel that's a great moment, and it's so fascinating how moments like that sometimes actors they just they just pulled it out of their hat. You know what I'm saying? They just they didn't feel anything. They just did it anyways. Sometimes these films that they do, these projects they do, they hate it, but
Yeah.
you don't know that
No,
because
absolutely.
yeah,
Troy is
you,
one of my favorite films of all
yeah.
time. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, please, please, you're fine.
Yeah. No, Troy is one of my favorite films of all time. And I love like the character of Achilles, and he was perfect for that role. But what's so beautiful about that film is he hated not just that scene, man. He hated that whole film. He didn't want to be a part of it. He was
Yep, there
forced
you go.
into. And I think that's so fascinating because as you mentioned, like he pulled it off in such a cool, badass way. And like the first book I wrote is it's about the character of Achilles.
Wow.
And for me, it was such a big impression because I watched that film and I fell in love with the character and the story. So it's like he didn't even know what sort of effect he ended up having on me. And that's all artists. They don't know what effect they end up having on people. Even you. You don't know
Right.
what effect you end up having on people. And I love how you connected those things. Like, man, like just say it. Just do it. You don't
Yeah.
know. You don't know.
Sometimes you just gotta say the line. It's like it's funny, and not to take up too much time, but Don Rickles. He's like
No.
an old comedian where he's the biggest like one liner where he dissed everybody. I
Mhm.
mean, he dissed anybody. He's hilarious. He did a movie with Robert De Niro, Casino.
Oh.
And there was a scene where they were in the house, and it was after his wife left him with and it was the scene where it was just between him and Don Rickles in the kitchen. And Robert De Niro took so long to just say it, like he had to put himself in a closet and ask himself, "Why am I saying this? Why am I saying this? Why?" And then Don Rickles is like, "Oh my God, this whole thing with you and the method. Just say the line. Just say the line. It's simple. Just say the freaking line. Sometimes you just gotta say the line, and
Yeah.
that's it. You
That's making
know."
me think of that thing I mentioned earlier with Joaquin Phoenix. It's just connective tissue. It doesn't have to be a masterpiece. It's just a small moment. Or it could be a big moment too, but it's just connective tissue. That's it.
Right. It's human behavior. Like there's things that you say that you don't know why you say them. You just say them. It could be one of those moments.
Yeah.
You never know. So,
Yeah. Mike, I really enjoyed this conversation and I appreciate you sharing everything that you shared. I'm wondering, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you felt like you wanted to say we didn't get a chance to? Or something on your mind that you wanted to express?
um, this is my first podcast, and well, I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I'm glad we finally did it.
Yeah.
It was great meeting you at that the one screening where we saw you meet the Amos.
Yeah,
And
great performance by you.
thank you, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I thought it was hilarious. By the way, you thought I was British. That cracked me up. It's like you thought I
Yeah.
was British, and when I started talking to you, you freaked out. You're like, "Whoa, what?" But yeah, you've done an amazing job. This has been a great conversation as well, and I hope I hope there's another time.
Yeah, no, thank you, man, for being here. I appreciate your time. And you
No,
reminded me of something I wanted to touch up on earlier. As you said, it was like a long time coming. And, I was sort of experimenting with the in-person stuff. And that was all great, but the cost of it was, um, it takes a lot longer to produce a result. You got to like schedule, you got to align time, schedules. You got to like find a place, meet up, get it all set and recorded. But the advantage of something virtual like this, even though it isn't like as polished, is get a quick result,
yeah,
And I feel like this year I'm trying to strive on speed because I feel like speed is more advantageous than slow and polished. It's like Alex Hermosi says, a mediocre plan will always be better than just like that perfect one because at least like you're moving, you get in trajectory.
exactly, exactly. I mean, not everything is going to be perfect. Not every opportunity is going to be perfect. Not every role that or film that you like I do, for example, it's not going to be great. It's not going to, it could be mediocre, it could be less, whichever. But at least you're doing the work. That's the most important thing. Michael Caine, one of the best actors ever, he even said the same thing. He had a friend when he was coming up where his friend was like, you know what? I'm just gonna save myself for those good films, those great films. That's it. Meanwhile, Michael Caine was like, okay, well, I'm gonna do whatever comes my way. And so what happened over time, people wanted to really work with Michael Caine more and more and more and he started getting those really big and wonderful roles versus his friend didn't really get anywhere or so far, you know?
Yeah,
So it's all about just doing the motion, and that's it. You know,
I
have
love
faith,
that.
work hard, and God will do the rest.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that, man. And I think that's especially a beautiful, important reminder for today because I feel like a lot of creatives, and I've fallen into this trap myself. We're trying so hard to look polished and beautiful and great, trying to look cool, right? But
Yeah,
again, going back to the beginning of what Matthew McConaughey said, less impressed, more involved. And Michael Caine's story shows that. He was just more involved, even if it wasn't all that great. Just getting that reps in.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So take me as I am.
Well, Mike, this was awesome, dude. Thank you for being here. And suppose until next time, eh?
Till next time.
Yeah. But that was the podcast, man. What'd you think?
It was good, man. It was fun. I'm not gonna lie. I was a little nervous, throughout different times of it, but this is something I have to get used to. I have to do. You know.
Yeah. I hope I
Um,
didn't hurl any big balls at you. I was just
oh man,
following
actually,
my
you
curiosity.
no, you asked some pretty awesome questions, man. Like really. And you know what's so crazy? Um, Omer or Omar?
Omer,
Omer. Okay, sorry. I
you
was
said
trying
it
to get.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so weird because sometimes I talk to myself, as I'm doing, like, let's say, for example, a scene, and something I've been doing throughout time is as if I'm doing an interview. If somebody were to ask me questions like these, and recently, within the past couple of weeks, I've been doing that more and more, just out of nowhere, just out of nowhere, because I just did a Q&A not too long ago, and I was asked these questions, and so it's weird how all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of thin air, here you come. Hey, you want to do a podcast? Let's do it. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's kind of almost like I've been preparing for something I didn't even know was coming.
Everything happens for a reason, eh?
Everything happens for a reason. Amen. Amen,
Yeah.
man. But yeah. Well, thanks, man. I hope I do service to your podcast. I hope it came out great, and I hope I gave you what you were looking for, what you needed. And if you ever have any notes, feedback, like I'm never too great to not have any notes or not have any
Yeah.
critiques.
The same here,
Please,
man. Yeah.
yeah, like if you feel like there's something I should have done better or whatever, please let me know.
Yeah. No, same here, man. I appreciate you sharing that, but same here.